Okay. Carlotta Neitzling, Carlotta, Neitzling, Neutzling, middle name Anne, Anne.
Okay. I want to start with where you were born, what year. So I want you to start a sentence out with, I was born.
Okay. I was born in Duluth, Minnesota, November 24th, 1938, which actually happened to be Thanksgiving Day. My parents lived in St. Cloud, but in those days, Mom went home to Duluth to Family Doctor to have her baby, which is why I was born in Duluth. And the doctor that delivered me was, I think it was Dr. Fischetti. Naturally, had to be Italian.
Had to be an Italian doctor.
Of course.
So you went to grandma's.
Went to Grandma Jeanette's.
Her doctor. Your grandmother.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be my mom's mom.
And that was at the Duluth Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And those were the days when, the mother didn't go home the next day. She stayed in the hospital for a week. By the time she went home, she took her baby and went home.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you were in the hospital in Duluth for a week, and then my grandma took you home to St. Cloud.
Right.
Where did you live?
We lived above Appert's grocery store, which was on 8th Avenue South and about, maybe 4th or 5th Street. There was a little corner grocery store, and Mom and Dad had the apartment upstairs.
Okay.
And they lived there for quite a few years because, let's see, if I'm 75, Butch was born in 42. Okay. So I'm just old enough. I think we bought the house on 6th Avenue right before he was born. I don't believe that he was born when they were still living at Appert's.
And that's the house that I remember?
Probably. White stucco house on 6th Avenue North, right across from Hester Park.
Was it white stucco? The only one that I remember was the one that was right by your house. Was that the house that you lived most of your life in?
You mean as a kid?
Yeah. After you moved out of the apartment. 6th. Is that by... I don't remember St. Cloud anymore. I can't find my way around it. So that's not the house by Calvary Hill that Grandma and Grandpa lived in?
Oh, no. That's way...
Okay.
We lived in the house on 6th Avenue, the white stucco house. And then they built everything around that on 7th Avenue was open field. They bought a lot and they built a red brick home directly across the alley from the white stucco house. And that's where I grew up, in that red brick house.
Okay.
On one side was the Hammerlicks, and on the other side was Clara Karinsky. And then Dr. McMahon was on the corner. And then the rest of the block was built up from older homes. There was Morris O'Link, and then there was Dr. Lar, who was a dentist, and then you went down 6th Avenue to the Quinlevins, who were all they were all attorneys, the father and all his sons. The only original, believe it or not, still there, she bought our white stucco house, she and her family. Irene Oddie, who is in her 90s, is still living in that white stucco house. And your dad and Tom and Irene's boys grew up together, played together. I don't know where all of her boys are now. I think she had 4 boys and one daughter. But she still cuts her own lawn and she shovels her snow, and she's something else.
I am going to steal this from you
Okay.
because when you're drumming on it, I can hear it.
Oh, I'm
Now,
sorry.
It won't edit very well, so I'm just
Okay.
going to set that there. So, you grew up in that house. We're going to wait for the dogs to quit barking. But what do you remember about the neighborhood?
Well,
Wait. We have to wait for the dogs to quit barking.
that's a pizza guy, I suppose.
Are you going to have some pizza?
No. What do I remember about the neighborhood? Lots of young kids. I mean, there were always kids to play with. Across the street on 7th Avenue, the corner house belonged to, and I don't know their first names, Fifields, and they adopted their nephew, whose name was Jerry Tillotson. His parents were, I think, were killed in a car accident or something, and they had no children, and so they adopted Jerry. And then next to them was Jack Kleinschmidt. Jack owned Jack's Outlet, which was kind of like today's dollar store. And then there was Rudy Hoffman, who owned a shoe repair shop. He and my dad were good hunting friends. And then next to them was Dominic's, and they had a son, Glenn, that my brother Tom was good friends with. And then when you got down to the corner, who the hell lived on the corner? I don't remember.
That's fine. That's fine.
And if you went the other direction, went south towards downtown, on my side of the street, which would be the east side of 7th Avenue, the corner was a duplex. Two older sisters owned it. They each lived in half. Family whose last name was Truman lived in one of the houses. They had 2 or 3 kids, and I remember they had a daughter that I played with. Savinskis lived over there. Raiders lived over there. They all had young kids our age. And then, of course, we had Hester Park, so there were ball games and whatever in the park all the time. And in those days, Hester Park had a connection of you can't call them swimming pools, but I suppose the initial one was spring-fed pool up like where the tennis courts are now. And then each one would connect to a pool all the way down until you got all the way down to the river. Some were ishy, slimy, horrible things. The next one would be real nice, warm water. They were just weird pools. And then you got down to the bottom, and one was a nice, kind of an average pool where I would say most of the kids would play in. And then the last one was a bigger one with colder water that seemed to dump right into the river. And I think there might have been a lifeguard for that one. I don't remember really being able to swim in those pools, though. I don't think we were supposed to.
Interesting. Whatever happened to them?
They filled them all in. And now, I mean, if you go like for the 4th of July fireworks, everything, it's all filled in. There are no pools anymore.
What is there anything specifically from that neighborhood that you remember, like a favorite memory or something that really stands out?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really, haven't really thought about it. Oh, I'm sure there are probably a lot of things if you really stop and think about it, you know, kids you had a crush on, kids you couldn't stand, people who you thought you were better than they were because you had a nicer house, you know, shitty little pukey kid stuff. I remember saying to this day it bothers me, you know, when you think about it, to a girl that I didn't like very well. I mean, my mom and dad had a very nice house, but my mother and dad were savers. My mother spent wisely, so did my father. And so, you know, they were able to build that house. Janet's father, I can't remember what he did, but he drank. Her mother worked as a waitress. And I remember she and I got into a bitch of a fight once. And the nastiest thing I could have said was, well, at least my mother doesn't have to work to support me. And it bothered me to the point that I went home and I told my mother what I had done. And she made me call Mrs. Rader and apologize to her, which is the smartest thing my mother could have done to me. But I've never forgotten that. I thought, what a mean, rotten thing for, you know, a kid to do.
At least you realized it then.
Yeah.
How old were you?
Well, I suppose 13, 14. Old enough to be a bitch.
It still sticks with you.
Yeah.
So, obviously that was a good life lesson.
Oh, you bet. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of, it was definitely a family neighborhood. I would say there more homes had kids in them than didn't. In a matter of, we'll say, well, let's take a 6-block radius. There were kids probably of all ages. Anywhere from kids my age, older boys and girls at Cathedral while I was still at St. Paul's grade school.
Okay, so you lived in that white stucco house. You
Yeah.
grew up there. So far, we've gone from the apartment right before my father was born. You moved into that house. You told me about the neighborhood. Tell me about school. Where did you go to grade school?
Started out at Wilson for kindergarten.
Can you say, I started out at Wilson?
Oh, I started out at Wilson grade school for kindergarten. It was, it's on 12th Street North, and I think it's between 9th and 10th Avenue. In fact, now it's what do you call the school where you can go and get your GED?
You got me.
Anyhow, that's what they do. You know, kids go there that have not finished high school, but they want their diploma.
What was it like when you went?
It was just a regular up to 6th grade school. And at that time they were, you went to kindergarten there, and then we didn't have a Catholic grade school. The closest was Holy Angels, which was downtown. And so, oh boy. My dad must have had to take me down to Holy Angels in the morning. We got on a school bus that took us out to St. John's Canchus, which was on 3rd Street North, and about 20, holy God, You're really making me rack my brain.
Well, where it is
But in the west end of town, it was Holy Angels was too full because of the entire north end was all Catholic, and Holy Angels couldn't handle anymore, so they started busing them out to St. John's, and that's when they started building St. Paul's grade school. And I think about the time that I got to maybe second or third grade, St. Paul's was completed. And then all of us from the North End were able to start school there, because I know your dad, there was a picture of him, his second grade picture, he was already at St. Paul's. And I know that I left, then the Catholic grade schools went right through 8th grade. There was no middle school. We didn't have St. John's. So, yeah, we went through St. Paul's right through 8th grade and then went to Cathedral.
And you graduated from Cathedral?
Yeah, in 56.
Can you say that?
1956.
Can you say I graduated from...
I graduated from Cathedral High School in 1956.
And that picture of you in your gown, is that in the white stucco house?
No, that's the red brick house.
Okay. When was that built? Do you know? And can you say something like, we built...
Well, let me think. '56, '52. Butcher Tom might know, but I'm thinking they started building it in the late 40s. Ed Jurek. I know the contractor's name was Jurek, Jurek, but I'm trying to remember if its first name was Ed or what it was. I know they had a lot of problems with him. I have a feeling that maybe I started high school still living in the stucco house, but by the time I graduated, we were in the red brick house, I think.
And the red brick house is still there?
Yes.
And so is the stucco house?
Hmm?
And the stucco house, the white stucco house?
White stucco house is still there.
What can you tell me about Grandma, my grandma, your mom?
Oh, the feisty little Italian. My mother had more guts. You never pushed her around. Never. My father could have told you that. She and Aunt Mary both were the same way. Where it came from, I don't know. Now, maybe it did come from their mother. You know, everybody always says, oh, Clara was such a sweet, quiet lady, except my cousin Mary and Carmen and Carl and those that lived right there said, So maybe they got from their mother a side of their mother that the rest of us never ever saw. That's very possible. And I never thought about it that way. I mean, my grandma was just, oh God, she couldn't have been a sweeter lady.
And she was in Duluth. Let's talk about my grandma for a minute. We're gonna go further
Okay.
up the chain here. Grandma Lyon, my grandma.
Yeah.
Your mother, her nickname.
Babe.
Okay. What was her full name, and then say what her nickname was.
Her full name was Philomena Dolores Jeanette. Philem. Philena. Dolores was Dolores, and Jeanette was Jannett. And she hated the name Philomena, and everybody spelled it wrong because it's Phile, and they always spelled it Philo. And so therefore they'd call her Philo, which she hated even more. And because she was the baby of the family, she managed somehow to acquire the name Babe and make it stick.
She was kind of a babe.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
She was kind of a what?
Babe.
Oh, well, I always thought my mother was awfully pretty. My mother used to know how to have fun, but my mother was very strict, extremely strict.
Strict how?
If I say no, I mean no. Don't argue. I don't care if everybody else is going out to the quarries. You are not going near the quarries. I don't care if so-and-so's mother let her do this. You are not. Oh, you went anyhow. Well, guess what? You've just been grounded for a month. You know, no ifs, ands, or buts.
What about with other people? Outside of the family, she didn't take any shit from anybody?
No. But, I mean, she didn't look for trouble or that type of thing. She certainly was easy enough to get along with, but if somebody tried to give her a bad time or double cross her, she let them know that she wasn't having any of it. And for that, I had to admire the hell out of her.
What did she look like? How tall was she? What did she weigh?
She was 5 feet, maybe a hair over 5 feet. Dark hair, dark eyes.
I can hear that.
Very pretty. I know. You know, how do you describe your mother outside of the physical features? I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. I thought she was much prettier than her sister Mary. And I think Mary thought so or knew so too. And Mary worked harder at being Grandma's favorite because she didn't have a family. My cousin Mary Dodge and I always laugh and say, you know, look up the word dysfunctional in the dictionary and you'll find our family.
Why do you say that?
Oh, God. So many screw-ups. But, you know, the Italian way. People across the alley from my grandmother's house. His last name, my girls love all the Italian names. Their last name was Apicilli. And don't ask me to spell it. But there was a case where her husband died, and then her brother-in-law's wife died. And they both had kids, so they just an automatic. They got married and combined the family, her kids and his kids, and he was from what they've said, he was a mean SOB. Treated her like crap, treated her kids like crap. Never actually adopted her kids because Leonard went by the last name of Apicilli. But Teresa, his sister, went by the last name of Dahlia. Yet, you know, they lived in the same house, brother and sister. Like I say, it was just a screwed up neighborhood.
So it was an Italian neighborhood.
Yeah. Primarily Italian. The church, St. Peter's Church, was the Italian church. They had the spaghetti suppers there every year, and there again the priest was Father Zarelli. Gotta have the Italian. Honest to God.
So you grew up eating mostly Italian food?
Pretty much. I mean, at home in St. Cloud, no, because my dad didn't. And I mean, my father expected meat and potatoes and not spaghetti and all of this, the Italian foods for all the meals.
So Grandma would cook him meat and potatoes.
I mean, we had our Sunday dinner was always either ham and potatoes and vegetables or beef roast or chicken, you know, Sunday dinner type thing. Sometime during the week, I'm sure we probably had spaghetti or you know, the normal meatloaf and things like that, hamburgers, whatever. But like I say, my mother was a very conscientious shopper, and my mother shopped what was on sale, and those were the meals that we ate. And that's why they were able to build a home, because she was very conscientious about how she purchased. And I mean, even within the family, clothes were passed back and forth. It was rare to get something new. My idea of new clothes would be whatever I got from my cousin Mary in Duluth. She was 2 years older, so okay, this school year I got all of hers from last year, so I had a whole new wardrobe. Where the clothes that I had last year went to Duluth for Carmen because she was a year younger than me. So, I mean, the only ones that really got to get new ones was Mary, and then they weren't always new because there was usually some cousin in Duluth who was a couple years older than Mary. So, I mean, there was just always somebody. Even little things when, say for an example, my dad had a work shirt, you know, a long-sleeved work shirt. My grandmother, when the sleeves were all worn and knocked to shit, could cut the back out of it, lay it out, and she'd make sunsuits for the little kids for the summer out of shirts. Nothing went to waste.
Is that because they lived through the Depression?
I suppose.
Do you know anything about that? Can you speak to that at all?
No.
No. Can you tell me about your father?
Oh, yeah. I thought my dad was the coolest guy in the world. And I figured my dad was a boxer. That meant he was a fighter. That meant he could kick the shit out of anybody in the world. And I'd see pictures of him from his boxing days. well, you know, like that Joe Louis picture, which was very impressive. And then Cathedral had a boxing program in the winter. My dad trained several of the boys to be boxers. And then they would put on like a 2 or 3 day show. Father Spicer decided that that was just a terrible, terrible sport. And he fought it, and he finally got it taken away. But
Grandpa coached?
yeah, he coached.
Tell me about that.
Well, of course, how much could girls know? My brothers would probably know more about it because the boys were little enough. He taught them, you know, just cute. They had oversized, great big red gloves. They would open the show, you know, get out there and smack each other around a couple times and trip over their own feet and fall down, and that was kind of the opening of the boxing show. Someplace, somebody's got a picture of the two of them. Have you got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I don't believe that he ever actually had them. No, they were not old enough when Cathedral ended its boxing show. And then years later, John Wilkin tried to start boxing in St. Cloud. And he got Thomas boys involved, and he got Rob involved. I don't think he got you or Russ involved.
Russ wasn't alive. I remember that.
Okay.
I remember that. So, Grandpa boxed.
Yeah.
How did he start? Do you know?
Through the St. Paul YMCA.
Can you say my dad started boxing?
My dad started boxing, I believe, through the St. Paul YMCA club. Someplace there was a list of, I believe, all of the boxing matches that he was involved in, whether he won or lost or who he fought. I don't know if that was the only sport that they offered or if it was just something that he found an interest in. I don't know really why he chose boxing.
Was it any good?
I mean, to my knowledge, my dad was never interested in baseball or football or basketball, any of those sports.
Only boxing.
Only boxing is the only thing that I know of. Never wrestling, although, I don't know, maybe there was not even, maybe they didn't have wrestling teams or...
Do you know if he was any good?
I guess he was good. From what I've gathered, he was good.
Can you say he was a good boxer?
From what I've gathered, my dad was a good boxer.
You never actually saw him fight?
No, I never actually went to a boxing. I think my father was finished as a fighter by the time I was aware enough of it. I think by then he would have just been doing some coaching.
And he coached for a long time?
Yeah, he did, because he...
Can you say he coached from...
well, I've got to stop and think about that, because my dad coached... well, oh boy.
He coached Golden Gloves.
Yeah, he was a Golden Gloves coach. Nat's got a pair of his Golden Gloves. little teeny ones like for a charm bracelet. Damn it, I'm getting a stomach ache.
Yeah.
I don't know when he started Golden Gloves boxing here in St. Cloud. I know Norm Kerr coached with him. I know that, funny how names come back. Frank Farrington was a sports announcer for radio station KFAM, and every, I believe, Monday night, he would give the boxing results. So the Golden Gloves team evidently traveled outside of St. Cloud as far as boxing. And then there was, I believe it was Dr. Mulligan was kind of the team doctor, and he traveled with them. Why those names suddenly came back to me after all these years, I don't know. I suppose you asking questions.
How old were Grandma and Grandpa when they met?
Well, they're 10 years apart. Let's see. They got married in 1935. And she'd have been 22 and he was 32. I suppose early 20s for her and 30 for him, because I know they were 10 years apart. And he had been married before, and not everybody knew that. In fact, I wasn't allowed to know that until after they were both dead so that I could ask any questions.
How'd you find that out?
Aunt Mary. Oh, your mother never told you? Well, I guess I shouldn't have said anything. Zip, that was the end of that. I was so pissed off.
So that's all you ever knew about that?
I went to my Aunt Pearl, and I said, will you tell me what you know? And she said, I'll tell you what I know. And there really wasn't a lot. My father and this young gal, and like Pearl said, she said, I don't even remember her name, were young, and they got married. Young and in love, had no money, and so they lived with her family. And that just didn't work. And Pearl said she doesn't think the marriage lasted more than a year. And they divorced. And she said, that's the last I ever heard of her. She said, if my dad had to go through the church to get that marriage annulled, she never knew. And I don't know. I mean, those were the kind of things I would love to have been able to ask. To begin with, why the stupid secrets. You know, all the family secrets. What would the neighbors think?
I've heard that Grandpa was a little bit of the black sheep of his family.
Oh, yeah?
Not really?
No, now see, that I don't remember hearing.
Okay. What do you remember about Grandpa's family?
Well,
Can you say my dad's parents or something like that?
I did not know my dad's mother. Her name was Sadie Stipe. My dad's father was Alfred Lyon. He died when I was probably oh, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. He lived in Forest Lake with his son Ernie and Ernie's wife Rose. They had a small house on the lake. We used to go down there maybe once a summer for a very short visit. My mother didn't like Rose. Rose was cheap as they come. Oh, God. I can remember Mother saying, when we'd sit down to dinner, now she will serve you a plate with food on it. Don't you dare ask for seconds. What she serves is what you get, and that's it. And then we'd stop on our way home and get something to eat. She was that cheap.
Wow.
But Ernie, well, yeah, his picture was up there. The guy in the corner with the beard, just a sweetheart of a man. Couldn't have been nicer. They had no children. Dad had 3 sisters. Beatrice married Ed Houck, and they lived in Portland, Oregon. Lou married, oh boy, John Hurt, H-I-R-T. And she had 1 son, and I have no clue where he is. He would be my only living relative on her side. And then his youngest sister, Billy, what the hell was her real name? Anyhow, she was killed in a car accident in St. Paul.
How old was she? About?
Oh, 1920. Very young.
And Grandpa grew up in St. Paul.
Yes.
Can you say, my dad grew up in St. Paul, and just talk about that a little bit?
But, you know, yes, my dad did grow up in St. Paul. I'm trying to think. Phelan Park. He didn't talk much, you know, about growing up, about, you know, neighborhood kids or after school jobs or things like that. I just knew that he grew up in the Phelan Park area. I know he was a good swimmer, and I know he was a good boxer. I know he was a smart mouth.
Runs in the family.
Well, he always told us a story about sitting at the dinner table and his mother said something. She was at one end of the table and he was at the other end. And she said something, and he came back at her with a smart aleck remark. And she reached in a bowl and picked up a potato and sailed it and nailed him right in the head with it. Took care of that. He learned Mama wasn't so meek. But, I mean, somehow families didn't, at least in our family, didn't talk a lot about when I was growing up, this, that, or the other thing. It was more in the present day. If we went to Duluth, it wasn't, I played with this one when I was a kid. It was, here, you got to go over to so-and-so's house and pick berries, or you got to, you know, go help. It was kind of a different deal.
You said you didn't know your grandmother on your dad's side.
Right.
Sadie. Why not?
I think she died.
Can you say Sadie?
I think Sadie Stipe died when I was too young to have known her. There was also some scandal. Tom has some newspapers that he got copies of from Carl that go back to some of the, not the Stipes. There was some murder within the Stipe family, I guess. When, I don't know. But the newspapers that Tom got, and he got them from Carl.
You have to sit back. I can't hear you.
Oh. The newspapers that Tom got from Carl refer to some gal having an affair with some married man and somebody shooting somebody and the sheriff. I mean, it was, when you read the way those newspaper articles were written, they're hysterically funny. But he would have, I know he still got them. And I'm starting to run out of steam.
Okay.
You know, when I first got that book for Sam, I said I'd start to write something and then I'd realize it was wrong and I'd cross it out. And she said, "Don't you dare." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You leave it there and you just go on. And you say, you know, sorry, I screwed up here, but this is the way it was, you know, type thing." And I thought, well, yeah, you're right. And then one, and it's a really dumb thing, but I was writing about, one of the questions was, when I was her age, younger, who were your favorite movie stars? And I was going to write down Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. And I wrote down Janet Leigh and Tony Stewart. And then I looked at it, and I had to put a line through it and thought, no, NASCAR wasn't around then. I meant Tony Curtis. But, you know, prior to that, I would have just scrunched it all out, and that wasn't what she said, that isn't what you should do. So I thought, well, I guess she knows what she's talking about.
Good.
So
I had fun today.
I did too, thank you.
It's my pleasure.